All
All
right.
right, y'all. Welcome to the Unfazed, Unedited podcast where we are giving you a bonus episode. So, no, this will not be phase one, two, three, but this will be a bonus episode with my Tory Burch fellow that's with us here, who is an amazing woman who started a business during the pandemic. And we have railed about women owned, minority owned businesses and folks that want to work with us and how to do that well. So I thought it would be awesome to have my friend and my fellow Alex Schrecengost come on to talk with me and Lisa about her business. So welcome, Alex. How are you doing, and how are you making it when it comes to business?
Well, first, thank you both for having me on the show today. I'm really, really excited and honored to be here. And honestly, how I'm making it is every day is a grind, and introducing ourselves and our organization to global corporations has been the majority focus to really just share and tout, you know, inclusivity and how people need to build camaraderie no matter where they are in the world. And you can't clone yourself. I would like to. But unfortunately, you can't have productive business meetings every day while also traveling everywhere and being everything to everybody. And that's really the premise of our organization. And what we do is providing that balance and being able to bring people together in different formats, to be able to be inclusive for organizations that have employees literally everywhere.
Yeah, I was looking at your website, and I was really curious if you could share a little bit more about how you came up with the idea and how you launched, because you launched during the pandemic and you specifically did so to provide support, income for folks in the hospitality industry who had been laid off or furloughed, right? So you're already coming from a place of inclusivity and support and giving. And so I think it would be great for our listeners to kind of hear how you traversed that and came up with that idea and then launched.
Absolutely. So, it wasn't anything fancy. I was watching Netflix on my couch and drinking some wine, and my very, very good friend who's a sommelier, who is an award winner, and she's pretty much the best human being, called and said, the restaurant told me not to come back and they don't know when I'm coming back. And she was like, I don't know what to do. I have to pay rent. And then on the other side of it, my husband, who's the head of East Coast sales at Content Square, was like, "Hun, I'm struggling. No one wants to take meetings with me. Everybody's scrambling and overwhelmed. How do I maintain relationships?" And so it started very casually. I had my full-time job at Wilson Daniels, which is a wine importer. I was their head of communications. And so I said, okay, let's set up some casual wine tastings. And then I really saw that there was an opportunity there. And I, on the other side of it, was not happy at my job. I was dealing with a lot of misogyny. A woman of color in the wine industry is tough, and it was a tough number of years. And 20 years I spent in the industry, from restaurant and front of house. And one, I saw the hospitality industry and what they do, and appreciated them, and came to love everything they do. And then on the other side, I saw how tough it is for women. And so bringing all those three components together, during Netflix, I brainstormed the idea. And 2 days later, I went paddleboarding and said, do I really want to resign from a steady job, even though I'm miserable? Because I have kids and I have a house to pay for. And it is one of the top, wholesalers in the country for wine. And I said, yeah, because I don't feel good about myself if I don't. And so I wrote that resignation letter after paddleboarding and I sent it. And I've not looked back since. I gave them number of months of notice, but was doing my business on the side. So we officially launched in July. I left my full-time job in October. And we went a running, and we were featured in Vogue magazine. And from there we started to get a lot of corporate clients. And I told them, every time you support me, every time you support this organization, you're supporting hospitality, you're supporting small businesses, and even what goes in the boxes. We work with a lot of small business artisans all over the world, and it really has become the model that I stand for. Making sure that all of these small businesses continue to be marketed, continue to be in the hands of large corporate conglomerates, and to introduce such amazing products. So that's where it came from.
Well, I've always thought that your story was super amazing because it was like put emphasis on the emphasis, right? It's like, this is what I already do, but let's bring all these folks together that do this work well on a high level and be a solution to so many people that were struggling, and some are still trying to catch up from losses during the pandemic, that no, they did not get a PPP loan, or they did not get any other help, or even city, state, local grants or support or loans in any way. So I appreciate you just being able to see the multiple layers of a solution you could provide. Now, what I'm interested in knowing is, obviously during this time period, especially when you're handling food and you're around other people and all these other things, how did you keep your folks safe? Because, when it comes to service industries, I mean, something as simple as pouring someone a glass of wine and everyone holding the same stem could cause somebody to be ill. And that's on a regular day, not just during the pandemic. It's exacerbated during a pandemic. So how did you keep folks safe, getting them back out into the industry to do this type of work, given that the model is inherently risky?
Yes, absolutely. So we were doing a virtual only model for the hosts. So the sommeliers, the mixologists, the chefs, they were virtually doing their events. They still do them. It's still 70% of our business. When working with global organizations, they don't necessarily want to do in person because they can't fly people from all over the world. I mean, look at their bottom line. It would be hundreds of thousands of dollars to have flights from India and from the UK and from California to all come to New York, for example. So for the events themselves, everybody was in the comfort of their own home. And then our warehouses, we had 2 packers per warehouse. That's it. Um, and no one went there, not even me. I did video walkthroughs, but it was very, very set in that we had to maintain compliancy. We had the government, stop and look at our food license and the cleanliness. And it was kind of like to go for a restaurant where they were like, okay, how are you, portioning this out? And where's your portion station for there? And so it continued, and it still continues in that capacity because it is food. We have our license, and they come and they check everything, and they're making sure that, the cleanliness is there. But during COVID, it was that much more aggressive where, I was just hoping the 2 people in each location did not get sick. It was just kind of like, it's sink or swim. We've got to do this, and we've got to maintain a lean staff to make sure everyone's safe. And it worked really well. And we ended up hitting $3 million in revenue in our first year. And we just continued with the safety measures. Everyone was wearing a mask. Everyone was wearing gloves. Things were going out in portioned stainless steel stations. And still to this day, we maintain that model because we fulfill globally, and everybody has different restrictions still.
It's interesting, right? Because one of the biggest aha moments for folks who don't work in the hospitality industry was that the pandemic, or the risks associated with the pandemic, disproportionately impacted low income, predominantly women, predominantly folks of color who are working in the service industry. So you have this, awakening, I suppose, for people who are unaware of that dynamic, and then how the hospitality industry kind of pivoted in some ways really well. Like, it sounds like that's what you did, and in other ways, not so much, right? Continuing to put folks at risk. I'm wondering if you have a perspective, kind of given your history in working in hospitality, around how, how that pandemic awareness around who is getting most harmed or who is getting most put at risk played out, and then where your organization fits into all of that.
Yeah, I think predominantly a lot of people that were from, white collar. If you want to look at the white collar professionals, right? The traditional sayings, because I know we shift and we speak to it differently, but folks that were in an office setting that got to just work from the comfort of their home didn't have that really visibility into, wow, these people actually are not getting paid for months at a time. They don't have health insurance for their families because the restaurants don't provide them. And it was an interesting education to bring, tech, real estate, pharmaceutical in the room with these folks virtually, where I did have Psalms openly speak about their story and say, I, I've been in the industry for 40 years and I'm hosting these now and only hosting these now. And I have, there was just very little support there. And yes, some of the more established restaurant groups and hotel groups were able to pivot and pay and take care of their teams. And they were able to do really cool things like to go and pop ups and outdoor spaces. But there were a lot that one didn't have the resources to begin with because they're small mom and pop shops, or they just didn't know because they're very linear in the hospitality industry. And that goes for wine where I came from. It's just how it's been run for the last 40 years. And that's just how they do it. And so it was really a struggle to be able to educate people openly and say, this is not as simple and as black and white as you're saying it. There's a lot of factors that go into supporting the hospitality industry or any industry that was, impacted. If you look at Amazon delivery folks, even though it's a huge corporation, or if you look at anybody that had to be on the ground during that time, there was very little understanding for the fact that these people were risking their lives and or just didn't have money to pay for their livelihoods. And I think to really answer your question, the biggest proponent was the lack of education and resources that truly impacted the industry in that capacity. And I'm starting to see more people being open to what's happening now.
Hmm. No, you're making me think, Alex, of that time when we started talking about who's an essential worker and who's not. And at that time, it was, our folks that were working at the grocery store, in fact, to make sure that we could go in and get food and some of those basic things and so forth. So I appreciate how it started to educate people, because the folks that are in the service industry often are, I hate to say it in this way, they're not invisible, but folks turn away from seeing them because they're in a service industry. But as soon as all that disappears, then all of a sudden it's like, where's my food and where's my wine? And so, given that, I think the heightened awareness that your organization is bringing to this, I think is just really profound. And I hope we keep this heightened sense of awareness between pandemics here. It shouldn't take a pandemic for folks to bring awareness, but I'm glad we have it now. So let me ask this, because I know you and I both met through Tory Burch, and it was all about women's empowerment and business and so forth. What would you say was your biggest challenge, separate and apart from a whole pandemic? I get that being a major challenge, but what do you see as your biggest challenge thus far?
Um, My biggest challenge, one is there's so many. I'm a small startup, so and I have a fully remote team and finding, the ability and the resources as a bootstrapped, we've been supported by many grants, but we're bootstrapped. And my husband and I have funded personally from our savings to be able to maintain. And a lot of the driving factors is revenue. So if we have any issues on our operations, it hurts my bottom line, it hurts my home, it hurts my savings and my husband's, and so, one, that's an issue for me internally is when I work with my operations team is getting them to understand that spending an extra $100 or $20 is really a big deal. And then also the fundraising piece of resources. There's, while there's many people that are saying they're supporting women entrepreneurs and especially women of color, Shauna, I know you can understand and relate to this as well as you, Lisa, but a lot of folks aren't giving money to women. It's less than 1% of women of color receive funding. So when I'm going out to investors and venture capital funds, they are very traditional old school environment, and I'm going in with a new future of work idea where I have to sit there and defend myself, and then I'm like, do I want to be part of that organization? Do I want to take their money, or are they going to turn my whole company around? So it's the resources on the one side, and if I had the money to bring in a chief operations officer would fix it. But then on the other side, it's going to go raise that money where, not everyone is like Tory Burch. Tory has been amazing in that she comes back and she's like, what can I do? What resources can I give you all? How can I further support you? And so does her board and her team. Many, many organizations don't truly do that. And they, kind of run you through the gutter. And they'll kind of say, okay, I need you to bring back this strategy. And then they're like, nope, we need you to be a tech company to give you money. And not everyone that's going to launch is going to be an AI or tech specific company. We're soft tech, if you will. So the resources has been the largest struggle for a small startup like us.
One of the things that Shaunna and I have talked about is the impending um, onslaught of I'm using too many words here, but the undermining of initiatives that are designed to fund women owned businesses or particularly women of color owned businesses. So grants or venture capital funds, right, that are specifically designed for a group of people. And, the anticipation that those are going to get challenged in court as being discriminatory. And I'm wondering if you have a thought on why it's so important. I mean, you already highlighted that so little money goes to women in general, and then even less to women of color. So why is it important that these funds or these opportunities continue to grow versus get cut back?
Well, I think it's, we have drive, we have the opportunity to really make an impact and a difference. We have a different perspective. I think for me, I have a disability. I'm a woman of color. I'm a mom. And so having leaders that are different takes away that groupthink. It brings in diversity and inclusion. And the largest piece is that, we shouldn't all be the same. We should all think differently. We should all bring our different perspectives. And that is what is going to make an impact for the future of work, for the future of entrepreneurship and fundraising, is having an openness to everyone's differences. How I would run my business, Shaunna and yourself, Lisa, you're going to run it different. And you're going to have thoughts about it. And as long as it's, a cohesive thought and there's leadership there, I want it. I want to hear it. I want you to run it in that way. And I think that if investors and venture capital funds start to think in that vein, they're going to open up the door to a lot of creativity and to a lot of innovation on how we work in a professional environment moving forward, because it's changed a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Alex, Lisa and I have spent the lion's share of our careers working in a lot of higher ed environments where we get to see young minds that are about to go out into the world and they have very different expectations. Whereas the description of a workplace that you just gave us is what they're expecting, because we've kind of prepped them for that. And then when they get there and find something different, they're like, wait a minute. If you're not Alex, Shaunna, or Lisa type, then I'm not even sure I want to work for you. And so I appreciate you kind of naming that this should be kind of woven into what we do. So let me ask this as kind of our last question, because we hope that lots of folks from various industries listen to the Unfazed Unedited podcast, and we oftentimes have opportunities to connect or at least to be heard by larger businesses from various industries. And so, given that many of them, I've yet to find one who hasn't at least espoused that they want to work with businesses like us, women owned, minority owned, veteran owned. In Maryland, we call it disadvantaged organizations. So, given that, what advice would you give to those folks who say they want to work with organizations like us, but they may or may not help that process out? What would you give them as far as advice to working with folks like the three of us?
I mean, it's really having an openness. I understand that they need revenue. I understand that they need to see that the vision is profitable and that there is a cohesive vision. That's one thing. But if there needs to be an open mind to saying, okay, things are going to work a little bit differently, but this might be the ticket. And again, you have to show success. But when I walk into a room, and you walk into a room and you walk into a room and you're saying, this is my business plan. This is how much money we've made thus far. We're profitable, or some startups we're almost profitable, or we're, pre-profit, but we've created something here that is actually going to change the world. Actually be open to the idea. I think a lot of it is just shutting doors, and you need warm leads to even get in the door. And there's no like, let's just sit here and listen. And I do understand time is your most valuable commodity. I get it. They get a lot of people coming at them. Most entrepreneurs don't succeed. You know what? 90% of startups fail. But the thing is, if you have an established startup, and all of us can speak to that, because I mean, my startup's been running for 4 years. Clearly, there's a vision there. Clearly, there's an impact. We're so busy that we're flailing, so clearly there's a demand. So there needs to be the opportunity to say, okay, this is what the vision is, but these are why I need your resources and I need your help. And there needs to be that openness. And I don't see it quite yet. I'm hoping it'll continue to evolve and change in the coming years. I'll find out in January because I have to fundraise. So I'll be going on that tour and seeing what they say to me in those VC funds. But having that conversation, be able to say, hey, this is where we're at and this is where we're going. And are you open to listening to me? And I wish that they would be.
Well, I absolutely love that, Alex. And I feel like we are kind of three peas in a pod here in that we've been past similar rocks before as far as challenges, but also successes when it comes to the work that we do. If we had not been at least remotely successful, we wouldn't even be here on this conversation. So I just want to thank you so much for, well, I just want to stop and be grateful that we even met through the Tory Burch Foundation and how we kind of met through that process. I think it was so interesting to see so many powerful women in business from different identity groups come together and talk about very similar challenges, even though they were in different industries. So I'm grateful that we got to partner, and I'm grateful that you got to meet like the other half of my brain over here, Dr. Ingerfield, who keeps me in check, but also we complete each other's sentences at the same time. So Alex, that's pretty scary, but in the greatest way. But thank you for joining us because we see how busy you are. And so the fact that you gave us a few minutes is just incredible. So thank you so much for being with us.
Of
Yeah, it was
course.
really, really great. Alex, one last thing. Why don't you share with our listeners how they can get a hold of you or learn more about your business, Culture with Us?
Absolutely. So you can go to culturewithus.com to see our packages and all the great work we're doing and case studies, as well as customers that we work with. And you can follow me on Instagram, Alex Schreck, SCHREC, to see the adventures of Culture with Us. But you also get to see my family and all the food. I'm a big food and wine person, so you'll get to have some recommendations for when you're out enjoying as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I am so excited and honored, and I look forward to speaking with you both again soon. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Well, that was such a great conversation. It was really nice to meet Alex. I think I don't know a lot about the hospitality industry. I do know that I have been trying to purchase wine and other food goods from small businesses, from women and women of color owned businesses. Like I've been trying to be much more intentional about that since the pandemic. So it was really good to learn about her business. One of the things that struck me, I think,
Mm,
was, she'd worked in the field for 30 years, I think was what she said,
mm,
and the misogyny that she experienced. I mean, we didn't
yeah,
go into that, right? But
yeah.
I have friends who have been servers in restaurants, women friends, and they've all talked about the ways in which they have experienced sexism and how stressful it is. And it just makes me really sad to know that that's
Mhm.
still such an enduring experience for women. And then for
Yeah.
Alex, obviously as a woman of color too, she's got that intersectional position of racism and sexism. And then how she has decided, and then when she was paddleboarding, right, she's like, I'm miserable. I'm going to do something
Yeah.
for myself, and I'm going to resign and get out of this space, and I'm going to do something and build a business that is inclusive and that is meaningful for me and create space and opportunity for
Uh-huh.
people that have been harmed by the industry. So that I just found to
Yeah.
be really inspiring. And Um,
Mm.
like I mean, there's so many professions where women and women of color, folks with disabilities, just have multiple negative experiences, right? And not everyone
Mhm.
can leave those jobs. But to hear her talk about making that change, I just thought it was just really inspiring for me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and, after meeting Alex and knowing a little bit of her story
Hmm.
through Tory Burch, she reminds me very much of which you actually gifted me, the McBride sisters. She Can set, the woman-owned business, minority-owned business, which I so appreciated. She reminds me very much of that story and that concept of, no, I don't want to be miserable anymore. I
Hmm.
do want to
Hmm.
do my own thing. I realize the risk, and I'm making a strategic step towards this. And it's kind of like that meme I see often on social media. It's like a mug that it says, "Eff it, I'll do it myself."
Hmm.
Signed women, signed Black women, signed people. Like it's always
Yeah.
us, some
Right.
combination of us that ends up being the solution, the answer to problem that's very clear. And I think, that kind of goes back to the industry even knowing or caring that it is a problem, because Alex made it
Hmm.
very clear that all of that has been chronically, historically a problem, and she and some others are becoming those who are the answer or the solution,
Right.
or at least the
Right.
interruption to that
Hmm.
type of behavior in their industry. So I'm so glad that she was able to join us. And I think what was most inspiring is all of her multiple identities and how she brought that into her work, so that it's
Yeah.
not only her answer, but it's countless other folks' answer
Right.
when they're dealing with the foolishness. And so, so when we start thinking about, social justice, how apropos that it's happening even in this moment, that there's so many different ways, and the creativity that comes along with
Hmm.
being the solution to a challenge, that
Yeah.
what's that phrase? If you keep doing what you've been doing, you're going to get what you've always gotten. And she
Yeah. Yeah.
interrupts that,
Yeah.
which I think is so powerful. So I'm so glad she got to join us. So Lisa, we have now our pod where our mouth is, when we're always talking about woman owned, minority owned, disadvantaged businesses, vendors who need to work with us. These are folks that we feel strongly about supporting. So we've done that here. So we hope you've enjoyed this bonus episode of Unfazed, Unedited. Y'all know where to find us. Go to YouTube to find us there, Instagram to find us there, LinkedIn, and also the website, unfazedpodcast.com, where you can find old episodes, new episodes. Now you have a bonus episode. Who knows? We may do more down the road. But
Yep.
make sure to share this. Share this with other people
Hmm.
that are in this phase of your life. So thanks to Alex and Lisa. We should do this again sometime.
Yes, we definitely should. We'll see you.